Welcome to the Wellness Creator Podcast. In today's episode, we are going to go deeper into podcasting strategy and discuss how in 2024 and into 2025, how to get new listeners for your show. And I'm joined with Sandy, my co-founder and our CMO. And, we've been podcasting since 2016 and a lot has changed. And so we want to keep you updated on the latest strategy.
Yeah, we did a few weeks ago, we did another episode on podcasting, and we actually had a lot of questions. So we thought we'd follow it up. And specifically like how to get found. How do you get your new show in front of new ears?
Yeah. I think that one thing to point out, and this is what we were just talking about ahead of time, is that like this strategy has really evolved since we first started podcasting 8 years ago. So the strategy used to be that you would have guests. That's why I think so many shows have guests, that you would then invite the guest to promote their episode that they recorded for your show, and that would be the strategy for you getting new listeners.
Right.
And I think when podcasting was more rare, that kind of worked. But now people kind of have their shows, and like just because someone they like is on someone else's show doesn't mean they're necessarily going to go listen to it.
I think it could still work. I do think it works, but you just can't rely on that. Like you've got to do much more than that. And you're right. Everybody has a podcast, and a lot of those guests now have their own podcast. And, what does work, what I think is interesting with guests is like, if you're on someone else's show, to take that episode and put it on your show. I think which we have one of those coming up in September with Sarah Fisk. I love that strategy because like two shows get, record one episode and it goes out in both places. I think that's a really great way to showcase somebody else's podcast.
Yeah, and your energy is so different when you're on someone else's show and you are a podcaster. Like the energy is so different than your own podcast. So it's like,
I don't know, differently.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful all around because your own listeners also get a sense of you.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And we also what we're interviewed about is not something necessarily that you and I would talk about. So if someone else is asking us the questions, it comes out so differently than if we were just to dive into this topic. So anyway, so I do think that's maybe a bit of a twist on the guest strategy.
Yes. And then I think for a long time, that was really what worked with growing a podcast, other than trying to like game and optimize to be new and noteworthy when you first launch, which we've all, I think, realized that you can't predict or like really have any control or power over. And then it was just a little bit random. I mean, I think consistency has always mattered. And that is something that we still hold on to very deeply, like consistency, so that your audience, your listeners know when they can reliably expect to get a new episode. I feel like podcast listeners are pretty loyal, and they kind of like plan to listen to the show when it comes out, like at the gym or when they go for their walk in the morning or on their commute. Like people kind of rely on that. I think to an extent they do that with YouTubers as well. But you want to give your fans or your audience really a chance to rely on you.
Yeah. So that just made me think about seasons. I really struggle with podcast seasons. And I get it because we've tried it, and it feels a bit daunting. Like for the rest of my life, I have to put out a show every single week. Oh my God. If I did a season, then I could take a break. Right. And what we've seen, because we've done this multiple times now with the various shows we've recorded, is it's just an absolute nosedive in the numbers. And with that second season, you've got to work your butt off to try to get that momentum again. Yeah. We just did it in June. So a couple months ago, I think when you initially started this, it was going to be in seasons, and it totally made sense.
Yeah.
But the numbers crashed to virtually zero, and it was so disheartening. And then you got to start from zero. So I think there's a better way so for your point of consistency, I think that's super true. And there's a way to organize and batch so that you do feel like you take a break. and are not doing this every single week. So for example, for us, I saw those numbers crash in June. Jenny, we got to redo this. And so we recorded a whole bunch in early July to get us all the way to basically end of August. So we had like 3-4 weeks where we did not touch the podcast. You went on holidays. It felt like a season break, but we didn't lose the numbers because we batched. And it's hard for us. Like,
Yeah.
let me tell you, we do not do that.
I know.
We do not do that well. So just an idea to like, you know, be that consistent, because I know what it feels like to be like, oh my God, I am trapped in a weekly release for the rest of my life.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it was like for like 7 years. Like I think we did that, and we have struggled with batching. I mean, I think that's like a separate conversation that probably is worth having with yourself. Like if you can figure out a way to strategically batch, even if it's 2 episodes in a day or in a work session, it will just make your life so much easier as a creator. I think when you are an artist and you have like this energy that you pour into what you do, this creative energy, it can be tricky to try to harness that energy and control it. And I think that's like, I mean, this is like Steven Pressfield's like entire, war of art here. But when you can do it, and we have gotten a lot better over the years now at doing this, like it makes your life easier. Because I desperately wanted to move to seasons because of like the years and years and years of never having a break. And it's really nice to take a couple weeks off and not have to do something creative for your job.
Yeah.
So I think you're so right, Sandy, where you can still build in like the seasonal workload as the creator, but the audience doesn't experience that as seasons. They experience it as like a continuous release.
Yeah, and the other way to handle that too is to bring back old episodes, like, from the vault or the archive or whatever, and just do a little quick intro, like this is one of the most downloaded episodes and I'm going to share it with you, and and so on. And then people are still there listening, and chances are they didn't listen to it or are happy to listen to it again.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into like the biggest piece of advice that we would have for someone who is starting out and wanting to, they've got their like kind of like core raving fan clients. They're like 1,000 true fans are already on board with listening. Their mom is listening, their best friend is listening. But like, how do you grow a show beyond that in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is getting harder to attract new people to your show. I think it's harder just using the podcast apps, like the people searching in there. Where we found the growth is on YouTube. And so combining, and I think we touched upon this in the last podcast episode, or episode about podcasting, was like this idea of video podcasts, right? Instead of just audio. So if you're already doing audio, it's just a little bit more work to throw on a camera and create the video and put that up on YouTube, because the power of YouTube is that it is a search engine and it allows people to discover you. And specifically, what we've been finding, and we heard from one of our clients yesterday that she's also finding this, that it's shorts. The shorts feed is where we're being discovered.
Yeah.
So let me pause there, because that was a lot. But your thoughts about YouTube and video podcasting?
Yeah, I would just say there's a lot of advice in kind of the YouTube world not to create a podcast YouTube channel. So there's not massive agreement on this. I think if you are wanting to become a YouTuber, having a video podcast is like maybe not the best strategy to grow as a YouTuber. So I just want to put that out there, that these are different things. But if you are looking for new listeners for your podcast, and listener may be watching your podcast on YouTube, or maybe it's discovering you on YouTube Shorts and then going and downloading your show on Spotify or whatever, Apple Podcasts, YouTube is a great resource for that. That does not mean that you're going to become like a famous YouTuber. Certainly there are podcasters who have made that happen. I was thinking of like Diary of CEO, and there's certain shows that like are killing it as YouTube podcasts, but they are typically recorded in studio with guests in person, with professional filming, multiple camera angles. And that's like not what we're talking about here at all. We're talking about just your normal podcast. You happen to record the video at the same time as the audio and stick it up on YouTube Shorts at least, even if you don't want to put the whole episode on, although that doesn't hurt. Because new people will find you and go and listen to your show.
Yeah. I think years ago, we even did this. We were like, let's just, we're recording this episode or this podcast, so let's just throw each episode as like an audio on YouTube, right? Like we would just, and it would just be like those crazy wave signs.
Yeah, it didn't work.
That does not work.
That doesn't work.
That never worked then. It certainly won't work now. But I do think we have an advantage too, because there's two of us. So watching the video, I've got it set so that it's dynamic and it will like the camera will switch. So there's something like changing. If it's you doing your show alone, I think that is a much harder thing to create, that visually people will sit there and like watch you.
Yeah. I mean, I think sitting there by yourself and talking to your webcam is hard in general. Hard. There's certainly people who can do it. Like bloggers are really good at that. That's like a special skill. Yeah. And it's probably, unless you're like showing your life, it's probably going to be kind of boring to people, to be honest. So I think you're right, Cindy. The dynamic, like the facial expressions of like the interaction is important. And I was just thinking of another example of this that has also really taken off, and not necessarily in a professional setting and recording studio, is Ramit Sethi's podcast. I think he's just now getting to the point where he's like doing this in a professional studio. But for the first year or two of his podcast, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. Is that the name of his podcast? Yeah, it's his book. It's just like him on Zoom with some people, and he's talking about their money situations, and like that thing has taken off because the content is good. Like what he's talking about is interesting. Yeah. And it was okay that it was just people's blurry faces. Nobody cares. Nobody really cares.
If you do have guests, I think this does work. I think it's if your podcast is just you all the time, it is a much it's a little bit harder. But that also reminds me, like, it's also one of the things I witnessed from Ramit, because he was early on in doing this, is that he would say, like, listen to my podcast next episode, but he's on YouTube, right? Like, and I thought, oh my God, is that going to be confusing to people? Like, you're talking about podcasts and I'm like watching you, or I've seen other people do it the other way around. Like, if you're watching this on YouTube, check this thing out that I'm holding up. And it doesn't make sense on a podcast, but I think we're at a place where it's very, very common that you just know it's showing up on the two channels.
Yeah. I think media is just becoming media now. Like, there used to be even just like 3 or 4 years ago, there was a much bigger distinction between being a podcaster or a YouTuber or a blogger. Yeah. And now we essentially talk about those things as like one. You're basically doing, there's like the audio version and the video version and the typewritten version or transcript version, but they're like essentially the same thing. And I mean, there's also like a beauty and a freedom and a sense of ease for those of us as creators to just be like, just making something.
Sure.
And people can consume it in whatever way they want, but I'm just going to make the thing.
And remember, we have to always make things different sizes all the time. Yeah. Like I know graphics and the video. Oh my God, that was awful. That was awful. So, I just wanted to go back and emphasize shorts, because if one thing that's amazing about YouTube are the analytics, and it's astounding what is happening, the growth that we're seeing from and it says like the shorts feed, right? Like all the traffic is from the shorts feed. Yeah. And so we use, I believe we mentioned this on the last when we talked about podcasting before, we use Riverside, and those are automatically created. I just click a button and they create a bunch of short/reels, less than 1 minute. And I edit them very lightly, make the captions our brand color, stick up our logo in the corner, and publish two shorts. So the only thing that I would say that has to be done well in this to get the clicks is the title of that click has to be interesting because you don't have a title or you don't have a thumbnail on a short, right? It's just like whatever screen weird faces we have. But there's like a one-liner, and then I would always put hashtag YouTube Shorts in the title so that it goes to the Shorts feed. And you have to really think about, you have to be a little copyrighty here. You've got to create like a one-liner that will make people click on that. So that's the only trick. And I can see if I make ridiculous titles, people click on them. It's quite fun actually to watch that. And the last one, Jenny, is you said in the video, you said, this is why, what Disney princess am I? Quizzes don't work. And I used that line, and that's our highest viewed short.
So funny. That's
right?
So funny. Yeah, that makes perfect sense because that's BuzzFeed's like top performing post ever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I would just say this is another vote for getting good at copywriting, which I know you're a huge proponent of, Sandy. And so like being able to even write a subject line or a title of a short video that's compelling is key. Like people, even if you have the best conversation in the world and everyone needs to hear that conversation about metabolism or perimenopause or whatever it is you're talking about, no one is going to ever hear that conversation other than your existing people unless you can figure out how to write that title in a compelling and provocative way.
It's like the content, your amazing content is gated by one sentence.
Yeah.
And if you cannot get that, no one will listen to it. It's the same as the title of your podcast episode too. I think it's very, very similar. When you write a line or the title of the short, it's specific to that, whatever's in that short, right? But also think about the episode title, because if people are kind of scanning and looking, they're going to listen to that episode if the title is interesting, obviously. And I think what I always try to do, and I don't always nail it, but always try to like imagine the reader or the listener reading the title of that episode and having a question. Is there room for me in online yoga? I don't know. Is there? Like you want them to be hanging, and they have to have they have to hit play for that question to be answered. That is, I feel like, what compelling means to me in copywriting is like people are like, well, am I that person? Is that going to happen to me? Do I need that? How do I get more listeners for my podcast? Like it has to have them asking 3, 4, 5 questions from your title, then they're going to click to listen. So just a little copywriting tip that just read that back and say, will people have questions about it? Will they want to know more?
Yeah, and this is super important, and this is this moment in time, how to get new listeners or new eyes on your work, right? And I was just thinking about, as you're saying all of this, like it's kind of always been copywriting, but also like 8 years ago, 10 years ago, when we were really first getting started in online business and with our software company, like the way I feel like the way that you grew was more visual than it is now. Like people really optimizing for like flat lays on Instagram and pins on Pinterest, like the visuals of a Pinterest pin. And so but I think at this moment in time, which is what we're talking about now in 2024, I think that sentence or that phrase, as you're describing, Sandy, is everything. And those visuals are like, because Canva exists and people just use templates and copy each other. Like even that style of captions of Alex Hormozi that was like really popular a few years ago that we also like emulated at some point with one of our shows. Like then it became old and outdated like very quickly. Like it just took a matter of time before apps came out that just like automatically copied those exact style of captions, and then that didn't work anymore. So depending on when you're listening to this, take it with some kind of a grain of salt. Like YouTube Shorts might not be the end all be all forever, but in this moment,
right?
You know, we have eyes across the internet. We have a lot of people on our platform and a lot of customers that we serve. So we have a lot of insights into other businesses other than just our own. This is what's working.
And I do want to just note, because we have this short or this 1-minute video, I do put it on Reels, and everything is less. Like I don't even know.
Yeah.
I mean, I know so many wellness people are there. I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to do it for a little bit longer, but there's a point where it's like, because it's always awful to post on Instagram. Like it's always like the
Yeah,
whole
awful. It's awful.
steps are awful. And so I don't know. So
Yeah.
if you're,
Yeah, it's not
if,
working. It does. I mean, and here's the thing is like you want to know like what the goals of the platform are that you're using. And so YouTube is trying very hard to compete with TikTok. And so that is why YouTube is showing your little short way more than your long form videos, is because there is a business case, a huge business case for them to try to take some of that attention away from TikTok and put it into YouTube. And that's how they're doing it. And if you think about what Instagram is doing, I think they were trying that for a while. And now they've also like kind of moved on to Threads, which is trying to take people off of Twitter or X. Like, and they're just sort of like a hot, I feel like Meta is like much more of a hot mess than Google/YouTube, which kind of has its ish together a little bit better. So, and Facebook/Meta/Instagram/Threads is trying really hard to make money off of you trying to show your content.
Yeah.
Right. So, the way advertising works on YouTube is such that like as a creator, it's not pay to play. Like you get paid when your content takes off versus you paying to show your content. That's a very different business model for you as a creator. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. That's all I got. Anything else you want to add?
No, just make shorts. If you want more eyes on your content / your podcast, make YouTube shorts and ideally use a platform like Riverside, which I think we pay like $20 a month or something for. And it does sentiment analysis, right? So you're not even choosing those shorts, Sandy. Like they give you selections, but what's happening is the artificial intelligence of the platform is like listening and watching your podcast video, and it's trying to detect through AI what is likely to be most compelling that you're saying, and it's putting that into those short videos. So it's not like you have to think about what 60 seconds is most interesting. I mean, you kind of want to based on what they give you, but like you're not like going through minute by minute of your podcast. No. Like let the AI do some of that for you. And I know it's not perfect, but it's probably always going to be improving, and eventually we'll get to the point where it's probably pretty darn good.
Yeah, I'll put the link to Riverside because we do have an affiliate with them. They have been, I mean, the technology is just so advanced from when we first started, but Riverside is absolutely the best platform we've been using for streamlining, for efficiency, and especially with 2 people or with 3 people with another guest, it's just worked extremely well. So I'll stick that below if you guys are interested in checking it out. Okay, amazing. We love podcasting, video podcasting.
It's very meta because we're podcasting about loving podcasting, but you get it. You heard it here first, folks. All right, we will see you next time.
See ya.